Jesus started his ministry, the very first thing he did was to prayerfully consider the 12 people who would become his proteges, that would then become some of the most powerful agents of impact into the known world. It was that prayerful time, considering who would be the next leaders, that impacted what we are experiencing today, right here and now. We are a result of Jesus' ability to raise leaders. And I want to spend some time considering what does that mean for us today, that we too are meant to replicate the ministry of Christ and to raise leaders. And it's going to be a thrill. Let me tell you this, to raise leaders, there is no more exciting thing. And something I've been realizing more and more is it's one thing to raise a disciple of Jesus. It's quite another thing to raise a disciple maker for Jesus. And that's what we're talking about today. Not just raising disciples of Jesus, but people who can make more disciples of Jesus. In fact, you're on this training to hopefully spark something of what it means to become a disciple maker, not just a disciple of Jesus. Hopefully you've tasted something of the sweetness of what it means to help people to become disciples, and even to help people become disciple makers. Matthew chapter 4 verse 19, Jesus says this, he says, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Can you see that? Jesus is saying, don't just follow me, but as you follow me, you will consequently become the kind of person who will create other followers, who will consequently raise leaders. When you become a small group leader, the task is to raise leaders. 2 Timothy 2 verse 2 is possibly the most beautiful passage in the whole of Scripture that talks about what it means to raise leaders. Let me read it to you. Paul writing to Timothy, his leadership protege, and he says this, "And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others." Can you see that? There is a sense of generations of raising leaders who will consequently raise other leaders. I'm inviting you into that journey of raising up other leaders. So we're looking particularly at small group leaders now. And what I want to do is ask the question, well, what is it that makes a person a small group leader? How do we recognize the heart of a small group leader? What are some of the key things that are within the heart of a small group leader? Well, the one is that a small group leader has a love for God. Hey, plain and simple. A small group leader needs to be a person who loves Jesus, who in their life has fought some of the idols of all the other temptations to love money, to love future, to love marriage, to love any other temptation, and to say, those are good things, but they're not God. I'm choosing to put God as number one in my life. A leader is one who has a level of respect amongst those who are following them. And so a small group leader needs to have a love for God, a desire to serve Him and honor Him with their lives. And as one leads a small group, that still grows. It's not about being a perfect person, but it certainly needs to be one of the key attributes, a love for God. Secondly, and almost equally importantly, a small group leader needs to have a love for people. The reason you're doing this training is because a small group leader has looked at your life and they've seen that there is a sign that there's love for God. And secondly, there's a sign that you have a love for people. A good friend of mine says the best way to describe love for people is the ability to carry people on our hearts. Great leaders are not people who use people, but are rather people who give themselves up in service to other people. That's what a good leader is somebody who carries people on their hearts and learns to love people with the heart that Christ has given them. How about you? How are you doing when it comes to loving people? How are you doing when it comes to loving God? Another important one, especially in our church, is that you're an active member in community. It's one thing to love God, it's one thing to love people, but it's important to be found in a local community, to be found submitted to local leadership, to be found following well within the local leadership system that you find yourself. In Common Ground, it's really crucial that you're in a small group, that's in a community that's covered by pastoral care. One can't lead until one is also following effectively. And this means that your life is submitted to the leadership. Your life is lived as an open book, not privatized, although personal, not privatized. Remember, it's the job of a small group leader to facilitate people growing into these types of leaders. You see, what we're looking at here is that when you start leading a small group, from day one, let me say that again, day one, you start thinking, who are the few people in this group that I can start to raise up as leaders? You see, if Jesus started his ministry thinking, who are the people I'm going to raise up as leaders? Then we too should start our small group ministry life thinking from day one, who are those people? And not to mention, it shouldn't take too long till we let them know we think they are at least likely candidates to be the next leaders that come out of this group. It really does help a level of ownership within the group when people are buying in. It's not a promise, but it is something that stirs the heart towards the possibility of leadership. So a question you may want to ask is, well, what are the skills that a small group leader needs to have to actually be an effective small group leader? You know, I've got these 12 people in the room and they're coming to the small group, but what is the kind of person that I should be looking for if I'm going to start raising them up as a leader? What are the signs that they're the kind of person that is a leader? Well, like I mentioned, they love Jesus, they love people, and they're active members in the church. That's an amazing part. But what are the other more nuanced things that we can expect to hope for in a potential leader? Well, I would suggest that if you have all three of these attributes, you're going to be an amazing small group leader. If you've got two of them, well then I would suggest you're going to be a great small group leader. But even if you've got one, there is potential to be an effective and life-changing disciple maker. And so let's look at what are those different attributes. Well, the first one is this: hospitality. The ability to warmly welcome people into your life. To have an open home and an open heart to the people around you, and to carry people in our hearts in a way that is warm, loving, and caring. The first small group leader that I ever kind of joined or was a part of was a pure hospitality person. She knew how to love us as a group. She knew how to cook for us, care for us, and make us feel like this was where we belonged. If you can be hospitable, if there are people in your group that are hospitable, hey, they're the kind of people that could potentially lead a small group. But that can't surely be enough. I think there needs to be more, right? Well, what about the skill of facilitation? Facilitation is the ability to get people to contribute. You've probably already looked at the module called Facilitate Contribution. Facilitators know how to draw the best out of people, to get people involved, to get people feeling like their contribution really matters. Great small group leaders help people to understand that their contribution actually matters. Do you know some people like that are great facilitators? If they're in your group, they're potentially going to be great small group leaders. And then finally, does this person or these people have a gift of leadership? You see, if you're wanting to raise up leaders, you're going to need to see a little bit of an inkling of a gift of leadership. Leadership is the ability to help people to see that where we are and where we could be are two different places, and then to help somebody get from where we are to where we could be. And where we could be is always a preferable future. Now, that's the gift of leadership. Like I said, if somebody has the gift of leadership, great. If they've got the gift of leadership and facilitation, superb. If they've got the gift of leadership, facilitation, and hospitality, well, that's first prize. But remember, we can always grow each of these aspects of our life as time passes by. The next thing you want to ask yourself is, well, I've got a bunch of people, and how do I make the leadership ask? How do I turn somebody from a member in the small group into a potential and probable leader in the small group? What does the process look like? Well, I want to talk about a process of training that I think will help you. This is more a mental framework than it is a step-by-step process that you can tick the boxes. But let me talk you through it. It's the I watch, you do process. Let me explain. The first step is this. I do, you watch, we chat. Step one, I do. In other words, I do an exercise. For example, I lead the small group conversation and I say, hey, I really would like you to watch while I do this because I want to have a debrief afterwards. I want to talk to you about what I did well, what I could have worked on, and what you think about how things are going here in leadership in general. I do, you watch me, and then we'll chat about it. And you do it, and then you chat about it afterwards. You see, there's low levels of responsibility for the person who's watching. Hey, the next step is to say, I do, you help, we chat. You see, what's happening is there is an increased level of responsibility. This time I'm saying, I'm going to have this small group conversation, but I'd love it if you could tell your story midway through. I'm talking about the love of God, and I know you've experienced the love of God. Could you help me in this journey so that we can convey this to the group in an effective way? And then let's chat about it. And you go ahead and you do that, and you chat about what that experience was like. Can you see how this person is growing in their ability to lead? So that's a great way to raise leaders. This process can take anything from 2 months to 2 years. The pressure's not on the timing, the pressure's on the process to make sure that we're setting up potential leaders for as much success as possible. And do each step thoroughly, making sure that you're always feeling confidence to move a person to that next level of responsibility. And there's nothing more exciting than the moment when you commission this leader that you've had the privilege of working with to the point that you're ready to send them off to start a new group or to lead the other half of a multiplication or whatever it may be. There's nothing like raising a leader who's becoming a disciple-making leader. There's nothing quite like it. So let's consider for a moment, what are some of the ways that we can multiply small groups? You see, if you're raising leaders, you're raising them for a purpose, right? You're raising them to help lead people and disciple them. Remember, the whole point of having small groups is to put Christ at the center of our lives so that we're growing in identity, growing in our mission with God, growing in our increasing ability to become like Jesus. That's what small groups are about. Well, then we need leaders, because the more people we're impacting, the more leaders we're going to need to help facilitate the process of growth. And that's why we're doing what we're doing today. But what are some of the ways you can multiply these groups? Well, we suggest there's 2 ways, and both are viable and good options. The one way is to start new groups for new people. Simply said, to start a new group from a small crew of people that you send out from your existing small group. Simply you approach this leader that you've been grooming and preparing for a moment to lead, to then say, I think you're ready. How do you feel about going to start a new group? You always make this decision and this ask in conjunction with your community leader. They've always got insights and wisdom that can help in these moments. So don't go commissioning a new small group leader without having some real good conversations with your community leader. However, there always comes a moment where you get to consider, what do we do? Do we start a new group for new people? In which case, you gather that leader along with a small core of people in your small group, and you suggest that they go out and start a new group. They gather together people on the fringes of Sunday meetings, people on the fringes of their lives, and begin to start discipling that crew of people. It's a thrilling model. It looks a lot like what we see in the scriptures. Small groups of people gathering in their homes and consequently gathering more people who are looking to be discipled into increasing levels of likeness to Jesus. The other model that we use from time to time is the possibility of a multiplication. Your group gets to 18 or so, and it's just too big. You can't fit in a home, you can't cook meals anymore, and the intimacy levels have taken a dive. You need to do something. Well, you've been raising up leaders from the day one that you started, haven't you? So now it's time to consider maybe a multiplication. A multiplication simply says you look at the chemistry dynamics and you look at the numbers and you consider a half-half split, where you take the people who seem to fit one side and another side, and you prayerfully do a split. This needs to be done really prayerfully and with really careful leadership to ensure that people feel that sense of being well led and well cared for through the process. Hey, that's why we often prefer new groups for new people, because it keeps that sense of ownership around the group and also the sense of a core around the existing group intact, such that people are enjoying and owning their group. So one of the amazing parts of being a small group leader has to be this aspect of raising up other leaders. Jesus did it, like I mentioned, and we too should be looking to do the same. I want to encourage you and ask you that you take this aspect of small group leading seriously. You see, we can't be gathering numbers unless we're making disciples. And the real acid test of leadership is to look around us and see, what is the quality of the disciples around me? Do they reflect the kind of people who are trusting the gospel, who are trusting the message of Jesus Christ, who are growing in identity with Christ and growing in a likeness to Christ, who are drawing closer to Him, who are living their lives on mission for Him? And one of the acid tests of our own lives and our own leadership is to look at the quality of leaders that we're raising up. And I want to look you in the eyes and ask you, from day one that you start leading, to consider raising other leaders up. Don't wait 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months till you start thinking about it, because the habits are developed on day one around getting people into a scrum, into a smaller scrum within your group, and you're beginning to team together to lead your group. I'd encourage you that you develop habits of raising leaders, whether it's a half an hour meeting before your weekly regular meeting, where some of your key interns, as we call them, gather together to pray, to discuss what's going on in the group, and to talk about how you can improve the way that you guys are leading and loving the people in your group. You'll begin to raise leaders through some regular routines. Maybe you create a WhatsApp group for the leaders to talk about prayer points and matters of leadership. Hey, don't turn it into a gossip situation about your group, but make sure that you're taking every opportunity to let your life splash into the lives of a few other key people, such that you're raising them up to become leaders who will be effective in raising up other disciple-making leaders. I hope you're inspired. I know I am by the topic, and that the journey of making disciple makers can even start before you become a small group leader. Don't wait till then. Make it a lifestyle of discipling people and helping them to replicate themselves in the lives of other people. There's nothing like it, and there's nothing like being put in the hands of God as we begin to be used to make influential people who make a difference for the good of Christ and the gospel. Have fun as you make leaders.